It might help if I actually turn my mic on. You think, guys? That might help out a ton. Um, so, well, since you didn't hear that first portion of it because I neglected to turn the mic on, what is going to happen is I am doing this series of grief over C.S. Lewis' book called Grief Observed. Uh, I think I finally figured out the technology portion of it. So instead of trying to upload a video each and every week from my phone to YouTube or Facebook, what I'm going to do each week is do a live stream of these videos, and then it'll be shared to Facebook and so on and so forth. But I'm going to try to do this every Wednesday evening to give you guys a video each week. So be looking out for each and every Wednesday. I'm going to try to be on it by 7 o'clock, not 7 o'clock, 6 o'clock starting. I know I'm a little late right now, but and if something doesn't pan out, be sure to pay attention to Facebook in case I need to postpone or cancel for the night. But yeah, I'm really excited. This is something I think that as a pastor of Coulterville, Tilden United, Coulterville, Tilden, and Marissa, that given this past year, I have done and been to a lot of funerals this past year, and given that this is a brand new charge, and then that we're sort of recovering from this pandemic, that we need to explore the changes. Yes, we are adapting and we are settling pretty good, but I still want to address some of the issues, not really issues, but just the grieving that happens. Because let's be clear on this: grief can take on many different forms in a person's life. It could be the passing of a loved one. It could be a major change within the church itself. I mean, grief takes on many forms. It's mourning the loss of what was normal to now having to adapt to the new change itself. And uh, when we don't address grief responsibly, it can manifest into something that's toxic, manifest into something that's not good for the individual who's going through that process. And C.S. Lewis, I think personally, does that very, very well in this book here, A Grief Observed. It's a really easy, simple read. I think it's like 90, I'll just say 100 pages roughly, somewhere in that area, 90 to 100 pages. Um, but he wrote this right, not too, I want to say mere weeks, if not a month, after the passing of his wife, who passed away from cancer. And this is probably in the, I want to say in the 40s. I'm not sure if it was during World War II she passed, but I know she passed sometime in the 40s. I think I can't remember the exact date. But when you read this book by C.S. Lewis, it reads almost exactly like his journal, um, which is the way of dealing with grief itself. But when you read it, it is very raw. It is very in depth and personal. There is a little bit of cultural differences in time as well, but overall, generally, it's still it's very raw. It's something that we can all relate to as individuals, as brothers and sisters in Christ itself. But C.S. Lewis opens up with this. No one no one ever told me that grief felt like fear. I am not afraid, but the sensation is like being afraid. The same fluttering in the stomach, the same restlessness, the yawning. I keep on swallowing. And it's very interesting to think of grieving as a form of fear itself, that the butterflies that you deal with. So, why do we get those feelings and stuff? Is it because of the passing of a loved one, or is it because that we are dealing with this internal issue of having to adapt to this change of losing a loved one itself? And hold on a sec. Looks like, I'm sorry guys. I need to make sure that I still got to make sure that I still got to make sure that I still got which is the way of dealing with grief itself. But when you okay, well, sorry, it's anyways. But dealing with that change, dealing with those raw emotions in the moment is something that each and every one of us will have to go through at some point, and it is very raw. It's very boy, I'm not trying to be like a Debbie Downer, but something that we will all go through, even at a young age. Say we lose our grandparents at a very young age, we still have to go through that sense of change of losing our grandparents itself. I know I learned from an early age of, at least I consider an early age of 13, when I lost my grandfather and having to adapt to that change of him not being there. But he deals with that change. He deal slowly as this first chapter progresses. You can tell that C.S. Lewis is falling deeper and deeper into sort of grieving, this sort of almost like depression. It seems like, um, but even though it's very depressing, like he might need help, it's very normal for what he's going through. It's nothing out of the ordinary, but it's something that as we have loved ones who are going through grieving, as friends and family are going through grieving, that's something that we need to keep an eye out on, just to make sure they don't go to the wayward side, that we make sure that we do support them, that we do help them through that change, that we just sit and listen to them themselves. But and this, I think this sums it up pretty clearly on what grief is. Like, this grieving process that Lewis is going through is zapping all his energy out of him, and he's falling deeper in his depression-like state. He even says this, and no one ever told me about the laziness of grief except at my job, where the machine seems to run on much as usual. I loathe with the slightest effort. Not only writing, but even reading a letter or two is too much. Even shaving. What does it matter now whether my cheek is rough or smooth? They say an unhappy man wants distraction, something to take him out of himself. Only as a dog-tired man wants an extra blanket on a cold night. He'd rather lie there shivering than get up and find one. It's easy to see why the lonely become untidy, finally dirty and disgusting. Now, I imagine we can all relate to that in some form or manner of the wave of sadness that overcomes us and envelops us. It's crippling. It's almost like, the way I would describe it is having a big boulder on your chest, on your body itself, just keeping you pinned to the ground, wanting to keep you there. But in the back of your mind, while you're staring at the ceiling, that you're not wanting to get up to shave, to bathe, to feed yourself, you're also wondering back of your head of, and C.S. Lewis actually asked this question himself. And you got to remember, C.S. Lewis is a very godly man. He is a man who's written many, many works of Christian theology that have shaped our modern church itself. And the question he asks is, meanwhile, where is God? Now, I imagine at one point or another, depending on the situation, that we have all asked, where is God in this moment? C.S. Lewis describes it as a door that is slammed in your face and a sound of bolting and double bolting on the inside. And after that, there's silence. This this unknown that he cannot get across of knowing where is God, where is where is the information that he needs to process to keep pushing forward. It's very depressing, and he asks himself, "Where is God in this moment?" And the one thing that he is definitely scared of is, "I dread," and I quote, "I dread is not so there is no God after all, but so this is what God's really like. Deceive yourself no longer." That second statement scares him the most. But we've all asked those same questions in us. We all ask those same questions of, where is God in this moment where I need him the most, where I am down on my luck, where it seems like everything is going wrong? Where is God? That sadness, that anger comes through and is perpetuated onto guys like you said you would be with me always, but now it doesn't seem like that. It doesn't feel like that. So where are you? And I imagine some of you have asked that in the middle of the night. And it's easy for the people on the outside to say, he's right there beside you in that moment, listening and trying to comfort you, trying to talk to you. It's easy to say that, but to be in that moment, we cannot be those people in that moment, but we can be there for the people itself. We can be that presence of God to the people who grieve. Grief is it's not only crippling in our own personal lives, but it's also crippling within the church itself. I mentioned in church several times that our conference is short, roughly 18 pastors. Two DSs have retired, and they're not replacing them. The workload for many different pastors is compiling on and on. There's going to be more and more 3 point charges. I know one of my mentors slash friends, he's going from 1 point charge to 2 point charge. Now it's still manageable, but that's still the trend that is happening within our conference itself. It's not only our conference that's happening, it's happening to not Protestants, Presbyterians. It's happened to a lot of people, a lot of denominations. It's not just the United Methodists, but grieving the loss of change. Excuse me, of grieving with change, of no longer having the new sense of normal, but now we having to adapt to a new normal of where do we go from here? And there will be times within the church, and the church itself will grieve on its own with these changes. It will be sad for a while, and then it'll be angry, and then there'll be a sense of what I would say kind of like a numbness, I would say. But then after that, when the church decides, like, where do we go from here? Do we go from chaos or do we go from community? To quote Martin Luther King Jr., to where we can go get on the other side of this grieving to push forward to still it's like hey, I'm still alive, I'm still here, I still attend this church, the church that I love. Let's move forward and accept the new normal, love the new normal, and keep growing as a church, keep doing the mission that God gave us. Now it's easy to say that, but it's part of the process. There will be tears to be shed, there will be anger to be spewed. The church may lose people. Some people might leave for another church, but it's part of the grieving process. Hopefully, those people come back. But grief is something that we were never meant to go through. Grief was something that we were never meant to experience in the first place, way back in the garden. But yet, we have to experience it. We have to go through it. We have to go through all the pain and sorrow that comes with grief itself. C.S. Lewis says this: part of every misery is so to speak the misery shadow or reflection, the fact that you don't merely suffer but have to keep on thinking about the fact that you suffer, not only live each endless day in grief, but to live each day thinking about living each day in grief. And that's something that what I've been trying to say in some of my sermons is when it comes to the mindset of the church, mindset of the Bible, perspective is everything. So if I could tweak what your outlook on one little thing when it comes to how you view scripture, how you view uh, the world, how you view prayer, what we've been talking about this past month. Um, to tweak that perspective, that could just change your world itself to where you're not thinking about the bad, that you're not grieving on the loss that you have obtained with the change in the church, and hopefully it might help you in your own personal grieving itself. But back to say your personal grief. We see in the notebook that towards the end of the movie we see the two lovebirds pass away in each other's arms. That most couples would want to go out just like that, holding each other in our arms and passing away just like that. But yet, and I was surprised that C.S. Lewis's wife made this, but it's very true. There's still a separation. She once said, "Even if we both die exactly at the same moment, as we lie here side by side, it will be just as much as a separation as one you are afraid of." And what she is talking about is we will have to, in our own personal lives, and I have a hard time speaking to this because I'm a single man, um, when we have to say goodbye to our spouse, to the love of our life, and having to live a life separate from them after being with them for X amount of years. That separation, that sense of loneliness, is probably crippling fear. Like, I honestly could not imagine it. But yet I see people, at least in my church, flourish with worshiping God each and every day. Even though they suffer and they have lost greatly, they still smile and worship God with all their might. And it's such a beautiful and amazing thing to witness itself. But that separation we will all have to go through eventually. Go, and she called it, she goes, alone into the unknown of experiencing, crushing that threshold into the next life, which is hopefully with the Father in heaven, by yourself. You can't go holding hand in hand, but you can go through it. This week's video is dealing with the raw emotion, the fear that Lewis had, including his wife at times. Um, just the fear of change itself, of going through it day in and day out. And I'm seeing from the church that they're gradually getting better, and I appreciate you guys for that. Um, but it's something I'm not going to rush you on of having to adapt soon, to allow you to take your time, to allow the anger and sadness be voiced out of the new change. And just like not only in the church life, but in your own personal life, I want to sit and just hear those stories that you have of your loved one that you passed. That's why in my sermons, I always want to put stories of the person who had passed and tell them how they how their life was much lived like God had intended it to. Whether good or bad, the truth will be spoken. The sermons itself is not a come to Jesus moment, but a celebration of the person who they were, the life that they lived, that hopefully it eases the grieving process more, but it'll still take time. But I'm really looking forward to this series with you guys. But know this, I am praying for you, for those who mourn this day, who are grieving the loss, whether within our personal lives or within the church's life itself. And I will see you guys hopefully next Wednesday at 6 o'clock, and to stay here for the next chapter. Have a good evening, guys. Bye.